Yo, what's going on, snipers, and welcome back to our Arizona Coyotes franchise mode here in NHL 22. So in last episode, we simulated a little bit more of the season, and as you can see so far, we are 31, 27, and 4. So we've kind of had like an up and down season, which is kind of to be expected with how young our team is. And yeah, now we're up here at the trade deadline, maybe making some trades, maybe not. I don't know really, because this team really could choose their fate down the stretch. As you can see though, like we're kind of in a playoff spot almost, just barely out of one because the Preds have one more point than us. So it really depends if we want to try and contend or we don't. And it's kind of up in the air on how this team is going to perform down the stretch, I think. Now, before we get into the trade deadline and all that sort of stuff, we do have a few comments to go over. So the first one is from HawksFan88. He says, I think it would be smartest to keep the team as is for now and just let the young guys play and develop, which I think is honestly the best route for this team, because right now we're like not necessarily contending, but we might end up making the playoffs just barely, and then the team could get some experience if we make the playoffs. If we miss, it's not the end of the world, because we could always get another good pick in the draft, and that could help us out in the future. So I totally agree with what Hawksfan was saying. The next few comments are from Pens Gaming 7. He says, you're on track to make the playoffs. Don't trade and go forward. From a realistic perspective, no one will give up on the position you are. You are very close to the playoffs, plus tanking with that record won't get you a high draft pick. You are very unlikely to fall down that far down. I think you should not touch the team and go for the playoffs. Give your young players experience, which is basically exactly what Hawksfan was saying. Is we're on track to maybe make the playoffs. We might just barely miss, but even if we tried tanking now, we wouldn't probably fall down far enough to actually get like a top 3 pick or something like that. Like, it's a very slim chance of that happening. So we might as well just try and actually see if this team could actually make the playoffs or not. The next comment is from Alien Pete. He says, I would trade Campbell at 50% and buy yourself a high pick. He does have some value. Also think some young guys could get a chance like Tracy. I'd move Fisher too for a high salary player and pick to clear his spot on the NHL roster. And then he also says, need to find a way to get Genther more minutes. Seems like he is regressing this year. I'd only make a move or two at the deadline. So he's basically telling us that if we wanted to kind of go the route of not making the playoffs, we'd have to trade Campbell and Christian Fisher, which if that was the case, I agree with that. That does definitely makes sense. As for Genther getting more ice time, I don't really know how we could get him some more ice time. Like, we could always throw him into the second line, but that second line has been really good for us this season, so I'd like to keep it as is. He isn't on the power play, which is interesting. I didn't even realize that. So we could take Julian Gauthier off, who's been having a career season. Maybe that's why he's having a career season. You know what? I might take like Connor Timmins off the power play or somebody on the defensive core. We're going to move Shelley up to the wing, though, and try him there as well, because there was a comment that said before to try Shelley on the wing instead of the point. So we are going to do that. But yeah, I think I'm going to take Connor Timmins off the power play, and we will give an opportunity to Genther, because I didn't even realize he wasn't even on the power play unit. So we'll throw him at the point on this second unit, and maybe that will help him out in terms of getting him some more offense. And we'll also take Timmins out in this spot too. And then we'll move Shelley over here and then Keller up to the point instead. So there we go. A little bit of a line adjustment. And then the next comment is from Mike Garbrandt. He says, go for Lawrence, but where can you play him in the lineup? I think you'd be good to go for it. Also, I'd keep the youth movement going. Maybe sell off some of the UFAs. Can't wait to see what you do. So, yeah, Lawrence is the only asset I would like to maybe trade for, but we wouldn't really have like the type of players to give up to get somebody like him. Because like, even though Dylan Burrows actually says in another comment, he says something about trying to trade Lawson Carosin, an AHL prospect, for Lawrence. That probably won't really work, because if we go to the proposed trade screen and what Tampa Bay actually wants for Lawrence, they want some prospects back, which is kind of weird that they would have him on the block if they want prospects, right? But as you can see, Lawrence has a good chunk of trade value because he's having a really good first season in the AHL. But in order to get him, we'd probably have to do something like Zion Nybeck, for example. And we'd probably have to try and give up like our 3rd round pick as well, because we do have 2 third rounders. We'd probably have to give up the one from the Florida Panthers, which I might be okay with doing. But even though that might not go through, really. And the reason we'd have to give up Nybeck is probably just to free up that roster spot in the AHL, because we do have a lot of young guys down there. And that way Lawrence could get thrown in the line up instead of Zion Nybeck, who is a 78 overall right now at 22. So basically we'd be banking on the fact that Lawrence is a 76 at 18 and that he would be a higher overall than Nybeck by the time he's 22, and the fact that he has X factors as well. So we might end up trying to do that Nybeck for Lawrence trade at the deadline, but trying to trade like Lawson Krause, for example, for him is not going to make any sense for Tampa Bay. And also he has like barely any trade value, so yeah, there's like no way we're going to be able to move Lawson Krause in order to get him. But yeah, those are the comments I'd like to go over. So let's get into the trade deadline and see what we could do and maybe get Lawrence in for this team, and then we'll simulate the rest of the season. But I don't think we're going to be trading away any players on our actual roster in the NHL, just because I would like to see how this young team performs, even if that means losing guys like Christian Fischer and stuff like that to free agency in the offseason. That's okay as well, because we do have guys in the AHL that could jump up to the NHL next year, including like Braden Tracy. So there's not really any issue, I'd say, with actually trying to make the playoffs this year. So let's advance today and get into this trade deadline. And we'll go in as, I'll just go in as a conservative seller, because it's a situation we're in right now. We don't know if we could fall back or not. So let's take a look and see if the trade finder actually has an offer for Lawrence yet. If it doesn't, then we'll try and come at them with a Nybeck offer that I was just mentioning. But let's see. Oh, there is an offer. Wow, that's an interesting offer. But that would take us out of the playoff mix, getting rid of Christian Fischer in 2/3. I'm going to still try the Nybeck offer first, but that's an interesting one. I'm surprised they actually have interest in those players. Okay, so let's see if we could get Tampa Bay to make a deal. We got to act fast because the AI might try and trade for Lawrence, which obviously would suck. So let's see, Lawrence for a 3rd rounder in Nybeck. Would that work? Because that's the only thing I could really think of, because I don't want to give up on Ponomarev, obviously. And then a lot of these other HL guys I don't really want to give up on yet. So Nybeck, because they want Nybeck. And we'll also give you guys the 3rd rounder from Florida, because we have our own 3rd rounder still. Let's see if that works. That's rejected. It's too far off apparently, which is kind of a surprise. We could throw in one of our 5th rounders as well, which might be a little bit of a risk, but let's see what happens there. And that's accepted. Okay, there we go. So that was actually a good trade. So Nybeck, it sucks to get rid of him obviously, but I think Lawrence is going to be better when he turns 22. And then we also gave up 2 picks that we had other picks in for those rounds, so 3rd and a 5th. I think that was a good deal. And we get in a good prospect into our system as well that will play in the AHL right away. I'm kind of surprised that Tampa wanted to move him, but I think that's our only trade we're going to be making in this episode. Just because if we look at our roster right now, I would like to keep the NHL roster the exact same, and our AHL is pretty stacked as is. And we do got guys, like I said, that could jump to the NHL next year, so I think we're good in terms of making trades. Lawrence is going to go down to the AHL, though we could play him in the NHL as a 76 almost, but I'm not going to do that yet. So yeah, that's the only trade we're going to make, is just for Lawrence, and see if that could maybe propel this team in the right direction in the future, or maybe even this season. Bringing in a good prospect in Nybeck, I don't think was going to grow much anyways, because I don't think I've ever seen him grow too much in a franchise mode before. So let's go to edit our lines, just setting down Lawrence to the AHL, which they readjusted our NHL lines, which is really annoying that happens. So Geeky goes back to the 4th line. Keller needs to go back up into the top 6. Yeah, that's good. Swap the 2 of those. Defensively, I think that's what we had it set up like. Yeah, I think that's pretty much how he's had it set up. And yeah, we'll send Lawrence down to the AHL and call up Karate, because Karate was a depth defenseman, but I guess they sent him back down, just because I want Lawrence to get at least some playing time down there in the minors. And under the salary cap, are you kidding me? Oh, I guess I'm going to have to call up somebody with a higher up cap hit, which really there's nobody on this team. Unless I want to give Tukinen some ice time here late in the season. Yeah, You know what? I might actually just keep Lawrence up here. And it might seem weird, but I'm going to keep Lawrence up here for the rest of the regular season. And I think I might take Michael Del Cole out of the lineup because he hasn't been great. Because Del Cole right now has 3 goals, and he's having one of his worst years yet. So I'm going to take him out, and I'm going to give Lawrence an NHL opportunity already. So yeah, with Lawrence in the lineup, we might end up missing the playoffs, but I think this kid needs a chance. And it's the only thing we could really do because I can't send him down at the moment, unless I wanted to call up, who was it, Tukinen, who was our pick last year. And then we could throw him into the defensive core, but there's nowhere that I could really slot him in unless I was to scratch like Baudin. But I think that's all I'm going to do, is just play Lawrence in our lineup. And then AHL-wise, I need to make sure all our good prospects are back in because they took them out. I hate how it adjusts the lineup automatically at the trade deadline. Like, it shouldn't do that. So Arnsby, just got to make sure everybody's in. Denisov needs to be in as well. So I'll put him in instead of Ratty. And that should be good. So there's our AHL team again still. Our AHL team looks stacked as heck. Like, when you have a 75 playing on the 4th line, that's pretty crazy. And then let me try and get rid of this negative part on the chemistry. Oh, there you go. That works. Oh, yeah, I was going to call up Karate, but I can't. Yeah, I'll leave the rest of that the same. Goalies are good as well. Yep, we're good down there in the AHL, I think. Actually, Kristanovic needs to play in the lineup instead of Capobianco, I think. Just because Kristanovic is another one of our prospects. There you go. That's good. And we are good to assimilate the rest of the season and see what happens with this team. Actually, I need to make sure the power play is good too, because we need that power play unit to be set up the way it was before. I don't think Geeky was in that spot. It was Farinacci more than likely. Ponomarev I don't think was on the power play either. I don't really remember how these lines were set up now. Who is here? It was probably Genther. What was this lineup set up like? Oh, I know it was Gauthier up there instead of Ponomarev, yeah. So I'll throw Gauthier into the power play line still, because we want to have our lines up to set up as the exact same as it was before. Calvin Shelley needs to be in there. I don't know why this has a minus right now. Because wasn't it like set up like this before? I don't know, but I'll just leave the rest of that the same. It's fine. Agostino, yeah, he's in the right spot. Okay, that's good. Switch this around as well. And then we'll take Timmins off there and put in Shelley. And move Shelley up to this unit. And that should be good for now, even though there's not really any chemistry there. But should be interesting to see how Lawrence does. Obviously, he's not going to get a lot of ice time, but he does actually fit this 4th line pretty good. And he also fits our 3rd line pretty good. 2nd line, not too bad. So he's a pretty good fit for this team for the most part. But anyways, that is our trade deadline. Let me take a look at what trades happened around the league quickly. We'll just kind of skim through that, and we'll sim the rest of the regular season. So, any big trades of note? Tyler Bertuzzi going to Montreal, kind of a big trade. Thomas Hertl going to Anaheim, that's pretty big, I guess. Torrey Krug going to LA, that's a pretty big one. Ryan Pulock goes back to the Islanders. I guess he was away from the Islanders for a bit. Brian Rust goes to St. Louis in that deal. Jack Roslovic going back to Winnipeg, so a bunch of guys going back to teams they were already on, which is interesting. Gossesbear and Zach Sanford also go to Winnipeg in that deal. There's our trade. Actually, no, that's a different Lawrence. Never mind. Anything else? Will Butcher going to Toronto. Marchessault going to Pittsburgh. Brady Shea and Zaboral going to Boston. And Charlie Coyle going to Washington. So nothing spectacular in terms of trades, but it is what it is. Now let's get the rest of the season simulated and see if this team actually can make the playoffs. If not, it's not the end of the world because this is still a young team. But if we can make the playoffs, I'm not opposed to it because obviously that will give our young guys an opportunity to get some good experience down the stretch. So let's see what happens. I don't expect the Lawrence to produce really good on that 4th line, but had to have him in the lineup because I couldn't send him down to the minors unless I wanted to call up Tukinen. But we're kind of being streaky still down the stretch, which makes sense because we technically have been doing that the entire season so far. Take Capobianco out for Snyder, who also might end up cracking the lineup at some point. But we need to figure out what our roster is going to look like next season because there's a lot of hungry guys in AHL right now, like Tukinen, for example, and then also like, what is his name? I guess we didn't have any injuries, but, and then also Braden Tracy. So we're 38, 31, and 4 at April the 1st, which has us, I believe, outside of a playoff spot. Yeah, out of a playoff spot, but we're still tied with the Preds, so it's going to be a very close battle down to the wire with us and the Predators. One of those two teams is more than likely going to make the playoffs with that last spot, which is kind of crazy. So hopefully we can get a lot of wins down the stretch if we want to make the playoffs. We do have, how much games left? We have like 9 games left. Yeah, 9 games left. Let's go to the end of these 3 games here. A lot of home games down the stretch, which is good. And Julien Gauthier has been injured, so that's a pretty big loss considering he's been pretty good this season. Zadina was never injured. We win in a shootout. We lose 10-1 to Anaheim. We shouldn't make the playoffs if we're going to lose 10-1, honestly. And Farinacci was never injured, I don't think. No, he wasn't. Okay, that's good. We win 5-3 over Minnesota. Where are we in the standings still? Still the exact same amount of points as the Preds, but with one more game played in them. Wow. This is going to come down to the wire. Because we're definitely not going to... We could end up catching the Golden Knights for a wildcard spot, but I don't know if we will. But, yeah, that is pretty damn scary how close it is to making the playoffs. If we miss the playoffs, like I said, though, it's not the end of the world. So we got games against Chicago and Buffalo. Let's see what we do against Chicago. We're going to win 6-5 in overtime, so some big OT wins down the stretch might end up helping us get into the playoffs. Sadikov needs to be put in where Janik was. But yeah, hopefully the AHL team also makes the playoffs, because then that would be great for some development down there in the minors. So Del Cole needs to come out for Julien Gauthier. There we go. Okay, so we are in the last wildcard spot now. We have passed the Preds, and the Preds have one more game played than us this time around. So we got to take advantage of the fact that we have games in hand now. And we are closing in on a wildcard spot as well in case we miss that. But there's not really much of a chance with the Kraken also contending for a wildcard spot, because that division is really tight. Like, there's literally only 9 points separating last place in the first wildcard spot. Interesting. So we got 5 games left on the season. Let's see what happens against Buffalo and Winnipeg. These are 2 big games. We win both of them in overtime. Wow, we've won 3 straight overtime games. Whoever's scoring those OT winners have came through in the clutch. Like, if it's Shelley, that'd be nuts. But we are up 2 points on the Preds now. We have the same amount of games played, which is huge. We might end up just barely making the playoffs, and we are getting close to a wildcard spot as well, in case for some reason the Preds pass us. But we do have a game against the Preds actually in the last 3 games of the season, which is going to be crucial to make the playoffs probably. And the AHL team failed to make the playoffs. Wow. Just getting notifications about that now. That's kind of surprising, because that AHL team is pretty stacked, but they're not going to make the playoffs. Okay, game against the Los Angeles. Can we win this game? No, we cannot. That is a big loss. We are now tied with the Preds in points and games played, and we're playing them today. This is going to be a big game to decide who gets into the playoffs, because there's almost no way we could get that wild card spot now. Oh, man. Yeah, this is a big game. I'm going to do a real-time simulation, even though that might screw with our chances to win this game, but it's in Nashville. Winner of this game might make the playoffs, or probably will make the playoffs. First period, we're up 1-0. Clayton Keller beating Jari. We're outshooting him 11-2 after 1, so a very good start for us. Second period, we're up 2-0. Let's go. Geeky scores on the power play, so the youngster scores. We're outshooting him 22-8 through 2 periods, which is absurd. Let's see if we can lock this one down and maybe get ourselves into the playoffs, as Barrett Hayton gets a power play goal. So our power play has been clicking tonight. That's good to see. I usually don't do real-time simulations during the regular season, but this game might decide if we make the playoffs or not. Final few minutes, and there's another one from Zadina to make it 4-0, and we're going to win this game against Nashville, which is a very important game, which I think almost clinches us a playoff spot for sure. Because even if the Preds win the next game, they tie us in points, but we have more wins than them. So, but there's all the goals and the points. 3 stars of that game. Keller, Zadina, and Hayton. Nice. Okay, so I think that clinches us a playoff spot. Yes, it does. We have made the playoffs for the first time. So it's good that we didn't trade away players like Jack Campbell, but we're going to make the playoffs because of a lot of OT wins down the stretch. Like these overtime wins, the 3 in a row, if we would have lost one of those, we wouldn't make the playoffs probably. But let's just get this last game of the season done against Dallas, and we are going to suffer an injury in the last game of the season, of course, to Samukarov, which means I might want to call up Tukinen, to be honest. I think I'm going to do that since the AHL team's not in the playoffs. Let me just put in a random guy for now, but we are going to call up Tukinen for the playoffs, which is going to be interesting because obviously we don't have a depth defenseman. So I will call up Tukinen from the AHL team. If I can. Yes, I can. Perfect. That will give this youngster his first NHL games in the playoffs, kind of similar to like what happened with Charlie McAvoy a few years ago. And we'll just throw in a random person on this defensive core because it doesn't really matter anymore for the AHL since they are not... Actually, let's just go best line since they're not in the playoffs. We'll definitely take a look at their stats for the regular season though. Okay, so Tukinen in makes it a minus, so let's see if we could get rid of that minus, which we really can't, unless I could fill around with this. Doesn't seem like I'm going to be able to get rid of that minus, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. Yeah, I'll just probably put Tukinen with Yuki Haru, why not? And then we'll move, wow, Linnefeld jumped up to an 83, interesting. I guess we'll have to try and figure out who's going to be our starting goalie in the playoffs. But Samorukov will miss some playoff games, but he probably will be back. Yeah, he'll be back within like a week. So that last game of the NHL season, we lost 4-1, but we do make the playoffs with 92 points, finishing 44, 34, and 4. So a lot of 4s. And yeah, I'm pretty impressed that this young team actually made the playoffs. So let's take a look at our player stats for the regular season, our team stats as well, and we'll take a look at the AHL because I'm kind of interested about that. Let's start off with our team stats and the standings. So in terms of our division, we finished 3rd, obviously. There's our divisional standings. I'll show you guys the other divisions too. But Tampa Bay winning the Atlantic Division. And in the Central was our division. So we go to the Metro. Pittsburgh wins the Metro with 100 points. And the Pacific Division was won by the Edmonton Oilers, not really a surprise. Entire league-wise, the Winnipeg Jets are the best team in the NHL with 111 points. We finished where in terms of the points in the standings? We finished 15th in the NHL. Not too bad. We scored 2.98 goals per game, which was actually not too bad when you look at it. It's kind of around mid-table. And then we gave up more than we scored, but we made the playoffs. We had a 3 goals against average, which is not too good, so we weren't really a good defensive team. I'm surprised we actually made it. We allowed only 2 more goals than we scored, so interesting. Power play percentage only clicked at 14%, so our power play definitely needs to be a little bit better. It was good in that game against Nashville, though, which is kind of interesting. Then we go to our penalty kill, which might have got us into the playoffs, because our penalty kill was actually pretty good, it looks like. Yeah, 85% for our penalty kill this year. So, yeah, that might be the reason we made the playoffs. We only had 2 short-handed goals, 23-16-2 on home ice, and 21-18-2 on the road. 6-4 in our last 10 games. Interesting. I'm kind of surprised that the AHL team missed. Let me just take a look at the AHL team stats. They went 39, 36, and 7. They scored more than they allowed, but they missed the playoffs, which is interesting. That sucks. Because I would like that AHL team to get some good experience down there. Maybe win a Calder Cup, you know. But let's take a look at our NHL team stats. So, Barrett Hayton had 57 points. That's not too bad for him. 24 goals, 33 assists. John Farinacci had an incredible rookie season. I might have made him too good. I might have made him way too good. 55 points and 27 goals. Really good season from him. He was also a +20, so that line with him and Shelley, fantastic. just like they were in the AHL last year. Ponomero, 33 points. That's a pretty good rookie season from him. So it seems like a lot of our youngsters are getting some good development. Geeky had 14 points in 46 games. He's up to an 81 overall now, so good call to have him in our NHL lineup. Asplund, we didn't play since the beginning of the season where he wasn't really that great. And then left wing wise, Clayton Keller, 66 points. That's pretty good. 21 goals, 45 assists. Not too bad at all. Agostino had a pretty good second season, 59 points in 82 games and a plus 12. He's up to an 85 now. Liking what I'm seeing from Tyler Agostino so far. Zadina, 55 points. That's pretty good from him. Really glad I brought him in. Obviously, we do have to give him a contract extension in the offseason, which is probably going to be a little bit pricey. Dylan Genther had 30 points, so he kind of picked up his pace in terms of offense. Looks like he helped out the power play a little bit down the stretch. Michael Delcole, only 16 points in 66 games, minus 4. Lawrence, since being put in the lineup, was an even 0, and he had 3 assists in 19 games. Obviously not putting up huge numbers, but he was only averaging 8:44 on ice time. And we could always send him back down to the minors, but I think we'll keep him up here for now. It was more just because I couldn't send him down that I didn't do that. Or else I would have played him in the AHL for the rest of the year. Maybe they would have made the playoffs that way. And then Lawson Krause barely played, which is interesting. We could always throw Krause into the lineup instead of Lawrence, just because maybe the youngster's not ready to play in the playoffs yet. And then Calvin Shelley, fantastic rookie season, 34 goals from him, and he shot 14.7%. Really picked it up down the stretch, but a really good rookie season from Calvin Shelley. He's up to 39 goals in his 87 games in his career. Fantastic stats. 6 game-winning goals as well, so he might have had some game winners. It got us into the playoffs. And he's an 82 overall now, and there's his stats just in case he grew anywhere. Then Julian Gauthier, 35 points in 76 games. Pretty good season from him. Christian Fischer, 20 points, not too bad, but a minus 15. Defensively, Chychrun, 61 points. Wow, I'm glad I extended this guy. Really good season from Chychrun. The best of his career so far. Not a great defenseman in terms of defending, but 61 points. Really good offensively. Probably power play points mostly. Maybe not, actually. Never mind. Soderstrom, 32 points. Timmins, 30 points. Seems like our back end definitely helped us out a lot in terms of offense. Sam Arukov, 22 points before his injury. And then Yoki Haru, 19 points. And Bodine, 13 points. So, yeah, the back end has been fantastic here so far. Goaltending-wise, Jack Campbell was really good. 30, 20, and 3 with 4 shutouts and 912 save percentage and a 2.83 goals against. While Elenefeld was 14, 16, and 1 with 2 shutouts and 906 and a 302. So Jack Campbell's definitely our guy to go to in the playoffs for sure. Let's take a quick look at the AHL just because I'm curious on our top prospects. So Tracy was pretty good. Varlamov was pretty good. Sadikov was good. It looks like a lot of our prospects were pretty good, but a lot of them were really badly minus, which is kind of questionable. But as long as they're getting some development down there, it's okay. And then what about goalie-wise? Wallstead was pretty solid. Prosvetov was pretty good too. But Wallstead still hasn't grown higher than a 78, which is kind of questionable. Let's take a quick look at the entire league because we still have to take a look at who we're facing in the playoffs. So Mark Scheifele led the league in points with 103 points. Most goals this year was Nathan McKinnon with 52, followed by Austin Matthews with 50. Most points by a defenseman was John Klingberg with 67 in Pittsburgh, and Tyson Barrie in Minnesota with 66. Heiskanen up there too. Interesting. But Jacob Chychrun was almost up there for the Norris, which is interesting. Goalie-wise, the best goalie for wins was Ilya Sorokin with 41, followed by Drieger with 40. Most shutouts by a starter was Philip Grubauer and Vitek Vanacek, both with 6 shutouts. Best save percentage by a starter was Peter Mrazek with a 924. And best goals against average by a starter was Elvis with a 229. Interesting. Best rookie this year for points was John Farinacci. So Farinacci and Shelley, both of them were up there for the Calder. More than likely it's going to go to Farinacci, but you never know. Shelley could win it too because of the goals for. But very impressed with these two guys. They were really good together in the AHL last year. We called them up this year for the NHL. And they produced really well on that second line. So very impressed with our youth movement so far. Ponomarev was also up there in terms of points. So definitely the rookies helped carry this team a little bit further than they were the last few years. Okay, so now that that is done, we got to take a look at who we are playing in the first round of the playoffs. More than likely, we're going to have a tough task no matter who it is. And it's going to be the Colorado Avalanche. So this is definitely going to be pretty tough because Nathan MacKinnon was up there in points. They went 50, 27, and 5 in the regular season, which means we're probably going to get screwed, but at least we're going to get some experience in the playoffs. Let me take a look at their stats by comparison to us. Yeah, they finished with 13 more points than us, which is really crazy. They scored a lot more goals than us. They allowed less goals than us. They had a better power play, and we had a better penalty kill, which is interesting. So if we could contain their power play, maybe we have a chance. I don't know. But let's take a look at what their lineup looks like. It's probably pretty similar to what it is like in real life. I'd assume like Landeskog, Rantanen, McKinnon, maybe, and Cale Makar, obviously. So they got Andreas Athanasiou, Nathan MacKinnon, and Trevor Moore as their top line, which is interesting. It's kind of weird that they split up Rantanen, Landeskog, and McKinnon, but they did. They also have Alex Newhook, who's really good. This is definitely going to be a really tough team to beat. And then third line-wise, they have Tyson Jost, who's really good, Sam Bennett, and Mikhail Maltsev. And then fourth line, they're running Martin Kaut with Ryan Dzingel and Grigory Denisenko, who they brought in from Florida, I guess. But that is an incredible team. Like, everybody on this team is pretty much like a third liner and above, except for Maltsev, on that forward core. And then defensively, they got Bowen Byram and Cale Makar, which is absolutely filthy. Troy Stetcher and Sam Girard, which is also really good. And Cale Clegg and Justin Barron, which is also really good. So, yeah, this is definitely a scary team. Goaltending-wise, they aren't as good, but they do got Kaapo Kähkönen. They also got Darcy Kemper. So we're pretty much tied in terms of goaltending. They're way better defensively and offensively, obviously. And then depth-wise, they're also pretty solid. They got Axel Anderson, Olli Mata, and Dmitry Jaskin. We used to play with us actually back in year number 1, I'm pretty sure, right? Yeah, that's what I thought. Interesting. Yeah, we're definitely screwed, I could say that. Because Nathan MacKinnon's going to probably score like 10 goals in the first round alone. So I think that's pretty much it. Let me take a quick look at the draft class again. Not that it really matters because we're in the playoffs, but just show you guys that. There's a guy from France, which is kind of interesting. So anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this episode of our Arizona Coyotes franchise mode. So in next episode, we will take on the Colorado Avalanche in the first round of playoffs and get some valuable experience for our young group. So let me know what you guys think down below, and I'll see you guys next time.